in a bubble, everybody looks like a genius. It just is. And again, going back to crypto, everybody who had any exposure to it at all, became a millionaire overnight.
What's up, everybody? This is our third interview on First Edition Outlet here. I'm Travis, and this is Bryan Pellegrino.
Got it right? Yeah, perfect.
All right, cool, man. So the guest's a little different today. I would say you're a newer investor into the hobby. Would that be right?
Yeah. So I played, I collected from base set back in the day when I was a kid, played Magic religiously. So I was like a TCG guy growing up. I played Magic all the way through university. Stopped collecting Pokemon when I was younger, but in terms of an investor actually like owning graded cards or having anything to do with this aspect of the hobby, very new.
So you were in a Magic. Do you invest in Magic?
I don't, no.
Why?
Magic feels more play focused. You see it even when you're looking at old boxes, when you're looking at anything. I don't think it's nearly as investable as Pokemon is. Pokemon is, I know there is a competitive scene and there is that aspect to it, but for most people, and certainly for myself included, it has always been much more about collecting. Even as a kid, we never played the game. I had an hour-long school bus ride every single day, and I'd be there in the bus seats, like playing Magic. I was sitting on the floor, we're playing Magic on the seats and stuff. But Pokemon, we just had a binder full of cards, which we would trade, and we thought was awesome. But it was more about that aspect of owning them and trading them than it was playing the actual game.
Yeah, I feel what you're saying there, because back in 99, 2000, when I was into Pokemon, I maybe played the game once with my mom, but it was 99.9%, trying to get the best collection, showing off, making the trades, the hustle of it all. So yeah,
absolutely.
I know you just kind of touched on it, but was it just ever encompassing in your life? Was it, because it was huge for a lot of us, was it that huge for you, or was it just?
Yeah, so played the game religiously in terms of the Game Boy games, right? Like
right.
Everybody my age, everybody at that time, like we all played Pokemon. Yeah, go ahead.
Let me interrupt you, because this is the most important question of the whole talk.
Bulbasaur. But go on.
Yeah, obviously that was a more important question, so you just kind of ruined my question. Red or blue version?
I played blue, just because that was what I owned at the time.
Okay, continue, sir. I was blue as well.
Yeah. So played a ton, and again, collected a ton, was just trading all of the time. But other than that, I would say by the time I hit 14, 15, actually that's probably what killed it for me is I started playing poker when I was 15, and we can go into that in a whole nother way, but maybe that was around the time that I stopped the hobby. But for those first couple of years, it was for everybody. It was just everything, right? It was the best game that there was.
For sure. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, like between then and now? Like, what have you done for a living? What kind of things have you gotten into? I recently saw a video. You put 120,000 into Pokemon, like
up to a little bit more than that now.
Yes,
this week has been a lot, but
that begs the question: what got you to that point?
Yeah, sure. My background's pretty eclectic. So started playing poker when I was 15 years old, was paying my way through university by 18, computer science background, dropped out of university when I was 20 to move to France with a girl, French girl who's now my wife. So moved to France, did the poker thing, was a poker pro for 10 years, traveled the world, did like 70 countries, did all of that. Online poker was booming at that time. It didn't take much to be very good. Got banned in the States in 2011. So I had just moved back home, just bought a house in Austin, Texas. Couldn't play online poker anymore. Started a daily fantasy sports site, which I sold. Took my son on a 1-year trip around the world when he was 1.5. So we did like 12 months, 12 countries. Wanted to learn AI while I was doing it, get back into computer science, built some machine learning models, sold those to some of the MLB teams. I got a huge crypto boom I went through. And then basically now I'm here. I also just published some academic research. So like I've never had a real job since I worked at a greenhouse when I was a kid. Other than that, I've just been doing things on my own, whether it's making things, investing in things. I've invested in a lot of tech companies. I started a couple tech companies out in the Valley. But yeah, that I would say in a very condensed nutshell, that's my path.
Okay, so when is the book or the movie coming out about your life?
Yeah, well, maybe one day there'll be a
Yeah.
tell-all, but
Okay, so why come back to Pokemon after all that?
so a very good friend of mine, Jeremy Levine, a guy I consider extremely sharp. He sold his last company for mid 8 figures. Mark Cuban has invested in him multiple times. I just like when he talks about something, I pay attention basically. And he came to me and said, something really interesting is happening here. Like you should take a look. And he was actually talking about the sports card market, and
Right.
started looking in, and what is actually happening here. And I'm a big, I've lived my life. I mentioned the kind of industries that I've lived my life in a series of bubbles, right? So poker had this huge boom from obscurity to every single person in the States playing poker. And then a crash basically when it got banned in the States. And then daily fantasy went from nothing. I mean, sites went from barely scraping by, 0 profitable sites, to 2 years later, a whole industry getting consolidated, all the sites being worth $1 billion, and they're spending, every ad that you saw for like a year or two was DraftKings, FanDuel.
Can I interrupt you?
And then the same, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so in your best knowledge, how would you explain both of those bubbles, how they started?
I think it's a cultural thing. I think in both cases. So one was poker hit TV and it was just mainstream. ESPN was playing it all day and everybody was like, it was the dream, right? That was basically what was being sold, was a dream. It was the prestige of getting a bracelet. It was the chase of wanting to, whether it's be on TV or win millions of dollars, whatever that may be, right? But it became something about it stuck culturally, and it wasn't just like this isolated thing. It was something that everybody was doing, and I think that's how a lot of bubbles are. And very similar with, I mean, it's just that's when you can tell. I'll say that for me, that's the indicator of when there is a bubble or something's happening, is like everybody is talking about it, right? Like I'm sure everybody in this space now has had, anybody who lets people know that they're involved in the hobby has had friends and old collections and random acquaintances ask you, how much is this worth? How much is this worth? And you have it's getting to the point where everybody is talking about it. It's becoming that ubiquitous thing. So it's no longer this niche novelty. It's no longer this thing where just a couple of people are looking at it and participating in it. And there's a lot of good and bad that come from new participants. But it's something where everybody is looking at it. A lot of eyes on right now.
Yeah, I feel like I still have a lot of conversations with people outside of Pokemon, which is good because they're outside of Pokemon still, and I'll tell them about the value of these things, and it blows their mind. So I feel it's not there 100% yet to where everybody knows, like they do baseball cards. You talked about baseball cards, be like, oh, I might have some worth, throw out some crazy number. But with Pokemon, I still feel like there's a lot of people that don't know yet. I got back into it after I saw Gary's episode on Pawn Stars, third quarter, fourth quarter of last year. And that came out in 2016. So it still took me about 3 years to find that and get back into it.
Yep.
So I like to base a lot of decisions off of my personal experience because I'm not the only one that has experiences like this. They're pretty general. So I think that the Logan Paul thing, do you think it's so big, or do you think 2 or 3 years from now, people are going to stumble across that for the first time?
I don't think that many people like who know about Logan Paul. A lot of the distribution in like Instagram and YouTube, a lot of that is, most people aren't referencing old videos unless it's something, I guess, exceptionally funny. And that was actually a touching moment with Gary. Part of it is something that I could see lasting. But there's just, Pokemon itself is so interesting. Like, we can say we're in a bubble, but the supply dynamics make it fascinating. Like it doesn't necessarily matter if we're in a bubble if the supply is so restricted that, or it just means that it could last an unbelievably long time. You know what I mean? I can't say if we're early stage, we're late stage. Like I have no idea, but the supply is so small in some of these sets that it just may not matter, especially with how, again, culturally relevant Pokemon is and has been, and like people talk about a lot, that the people who grew up with Pokemon are now finally coming into careers and money and like have the kind of peak spending power that they have been able to have. And that just brings in a lot, like there's just a lot of room basically for that to run.
A couple weeks ago, I sold, sadly, it shouldn't sell anything apparently today, but I sold, I had doubles, PSA 9s, they were all PSA 9s across the board because I sent in my old collection. Team Rocket, First Edition, Charizard, Blastoise, all the Team Rocket cards. And I love the art on those cards, and they mean a lot to me. But at the same time, it's one of the biggest populations out there, the Team Rocket cards. And I thought, well, I can sell these cards, and if I really miss them, I'll just buy them back a little into the future because they feel like the safe bet to sell. Like, I want to sell some stuff and put it somewhere else. So high population cards going to get rid of. Well, apparently population really doesn't matter right now. So do you think that there's a change where the old market forces and the things that we used to think about when investing, do you feel like that's changed now? Because do you think less people like SM Pratt, do you think he's being watered down and replaced with hype and ignorance? Do you think the old reasons to invest in things are kind of disappearing? I mean, I feel like they'll eventually come back, but at
Yeah,
least.
so those things only happen for a moment. Like
Mhm.
in SM Pratt is an amazing resource. He's like a wealth of knowledge. I think he's unbelievably grounded, just seems like a fantastic guy in general. I don't know if he'll be the like leading influencer in the space moving forward, because again, a lot of times the people who are most grounded are not the people who get the most attention, like naturally, right? Take a Gary V versus somebody else similar business wise to Gary V. Like Gary V is just constantly promoting and hype, and like he's just high energy, and that gets a big audience. But no, in terms of the fundamentals of investing and in terms of like, will the markets regain sanity at some point? They will. So I think you can still gauge things in relative value. It's just really hard to set a base right now. So you can still roughly know like what these things should be worth relative to those things. You can see like the correlations between the sets, I think, are going to still hold reasonably well. But I don't really know what like the base value is that all the other multipliers are going to be based around. So I do think we'll regain sanity at some point. But again, because the supply is so low right now, that could go on for a very long time. But sellers, I mean, things are moving extremely aggressively. Cards that I bought, I bought a card for like 200 4 weeks ago and just sold it for 1,700, right? Like that's just crazy. And it's because people are just laddering up. Everybody uses last bid. So last sale. So, okay, I bought it at 200. Some guy really needs it for his collection. He buys it at 400. The next seller is like, I'm not selling under 700. It only takes a couple of sales for things to move up really egregiously.
Did you come in to make money, or are you a collector? All right. Would you consider yourself a collector or an investor?
Both, I would say both. So again, Jeremy told me something's interesting happening. He's looking at sports cards. I said, it's just too much for me. There's a million sets, a million people producing things. Like there's all of these different prisms and borders, and like, it was just way too much to take in. And I was like, I grew up with Pokemon. I know Pokemon. Not as many people are looking there. Let me see what's happening. And basically I spent a week or so asking myself, does this look like a bubble? Does this look like it could be a bubble? And then it was, how do I get exposure to it? Now, there are a couple options. I mentioned, there are 3 plus $20 million institutional funds being raised around this space right now, alternative assets and collections. And I know of a couple that are much, much larger than that are potentially being raised. So I could invest in a fund. Great, not very exciting. They're going to take a management fee. They're going to take carry on it. So you're losing a big percentage. You never get to experience it at all. I could invest in one of the operators who are spinning up, and there are 20 to 30 at least new startups coming up to service this space. And I think that's going to help newcomers a ton. I think the sooner that happens, the better. Because coming in, I think is really, really difficult. There's just so much out there. It's so hard. For me, I wanted to just experience. I want to live it. I wanted to know what it is. So I said the easiest thing I can do is first edition base set, PSA 10 only. And let me just start there and let me just see how it feels and see how it looks. And that turned into this insanity. Again, I'm up to like almost 160,000. So I'm buying a lot. I do, and again, we can get into this later if you want to. I have lived in living bubbles. You know, in 2017, I went from a fairly modest amount to generational wealth, truly generational wealth. You know, you're talking like tens of millions of dollars. And I basically, you know, I rode that down into significantly less than that, right? And so I had this moment where I had this space that I believed in and I loved it, and I was in it, very knowledgeable about it, and I saw something that went from, you know, just the point where I could have easily taken money off of the table and rode off into the sunset, more or less, right? Mm-hmm. And I didn't. And I've learned from that. And so as much as I love the space and love what's happening, I also like have that in the like drilled into my heart of like, make sure that doesn't happen again. So I've been fortunate. You know, I've been fortunate in prices. Anybody who's gotten it has been fortunate. I certainly will take out my initial capital. I just sold my Raichu. So first edition PSA 10 Raichu I just sold. And so originally I wanted the complete set of first ed base 10. And it just ran away from me, right? When I started, it was like 150, 200,000 for the whole set. I was like, I could do that. That's something I could do. I'm going to slowly start piecing it together. You know, then it jumped up to like a couple 100,000, and then it jumped up to, you know, not even 600,000, won't even get it for you. And so I'm pretty committed now that I'm going to sell off my holos. So the 3 holos I had were Raichu, Blastoise, and Venusaur, all in 10. And I'm just going to take that. That'll be my capital out, and it's going to free up. You know that I've been hugely into TopSun, so I love that. I've been buying a ton. That's something I will certainly hold a lot of for a very long time. And I want to explore some other stuff, even like more novel things. Southern Islands, I think, is amazing. Like I like kind of the quaint, smaller stuff. I'm just drawn to it, drawn to it personally, and that for sure.
And it's an easy set for people to put together too, like 18
100%.
cards. Yeah.
Yeah. So I will keep collecting no matter what, but I also keep the monetary value in mind in the back of my head. So I will sell things. There's nothing that I'm like, maybe there will be eventually, but there's nothing that I'm like, I will never, ever, ever sell this. But I like the part of trying to build a set, trying to complete something, feeling ownership of that, feeling just the satisfaction of having done it.
Yeah. Well, let me get some props to help me with my next question here. Yeah. Okay. What would be your best call? Would you move stuff like this guy right here if you were looking to get rid of stuff? Something like this, which I think maybe could possibly be closer to its peak than something like this. Because these have been a great investment. The commons, I used to pick these up for about $60. Now you can't touch one of the worst commons, or the floor is like 300 now. Yep. So I'm curious if you think these still have a lot of room to grow compared to the holographics.
So I think, and it's weird because I'm acting in a different way, right? I'm selling my holographics mostly because of my disenchantment that I'll never own all the holos, right? Yes. So it's more just like, I'm going to purge these. But no, I completely agree. The pops are way bigger on the commons, and I just think, if somebody, you know, new people are coming in the space right now, they just want exposure. Or there's a lot of people coming in here just trying to flip things, it's interesting. There's a market happening, and that draws people. That's fine. At the end of the day, though, when those people leave, if somebody owns a trophy piece, if somebody has something that's never going to hit the market, it's those first set hollows or just the hollows in general, right? I think that's always going to hold value better in a downturn and probably do much better in an upturn. Like the population on the commons are just too much. And eventually when people are purging parts of their collection or getting out, I think it's going to be the commons that go first. And yeah, I mean, my Blastoise that I got, I think was the first one to sell for a very long time. Like most of those hollows you just see are impossible. Chansey, Hitmonchan, just like never, ever, ever on the market. And that means price can go a lot of different ways. But yeah, I think the hollows are going to be for a longer term investment. They're both hold value better in any bad market conditions and to probably have more upside.
When did you get back into it? Was 2019 or was it this year? Or
No, it was this year. So basically very end of August. So I've done a lot in 2 months. I have basically spent every day for the last 2 months checking eBay, Mercari. I had people running around in Japan buying up TopSun in person for me. You know, E4, Instagram, everywhere that I possibly could. I check prices, 100 times a day. I post all day. I talk to people all day. Just trying to gauge market, was trying to get myself acquainted with it. It's the only way. You have to dive in completely. So I'm a very new participant, 100%.
And do you feel like the excitement keeps building, or do you ever have a day or two where you're like, I just don't, why am I doing this?
No, for me, the excitement keeps building for sure. I've had a couple of moments that, I kicked myself over. I mentioned, when I first started, I didn't think things would run like they would, and nobody could predicted it. So I started really small. Where actually, you told me, do I have anything to bring? I brought this was my first box I bought. Those are all common, uncommon, PSA 10. So I just bought a lot here locally. It was about 10 to 12,000 US. And basically, I just started there, and I should have started with hollows. It felt so scary at the time. I did offer somebody my car for a Charizard, which got turned down, which I wish would have been accepted. So that was the one thing that I did do. But other than that, I totally slept on them. So once I saw the hollows run, like that was a little bit disheartening, just knowing I'll never complete the set. And then the other two were TopSun deals, 2 deals that I was pretty close to finishing. One, a really nice condition blue set with hollows complete raw that I wanted to buy. And I just asked him, like the pictures were kind of grainy on a couple cards. And I was like, could you, I'd like to buy this. I put in an offer for 80% of his price, but I'll pay up to full price. But can you just send me a couple pictures of the nicer cards in the set? And he's just like, oh, I didn't realize this is worth so much now. Pulled the listing. And then the same thing with eBirdman. He had his complete hollow TopSun set, 15 of 16 for 60K. I offered him 50K, was trying to work something out, and he pulled it and relisted it for 199K. So both of those were just moments where it's like, I don't know. It was those were the worst feeling moments to me. But otherwise, I love it. I've been having a blast. It's hard. Like anybody's going to love it when prices keep going up. So ask me again in 6, 12, 18 months. But for the moment, I have no intention of stopping. It's been full joy the whole time. And the more that prices rise, though, the more that my fear receptors are going is like, this is crazy. This is getting pretty crazy. But no, I've 100% enjoyment.
About the TopSun, I find it interesting. If you've watched my videos, I like to show this one off. I love this card. The no number Charizard.
Yep.
Like, I think it'd be interesting to find out how you got into those, how you found out.
Part of it was just the narrative. I thought the story was really cool. There's still, the unknown. Is it the first set? Probably the first set printed, not the first set distributed. But it's pre-TCG in terms of print. So that story of it, like the first thing ever printed in Pokemon, is very cool. But after that, I was so drawn to the art of them. I don't know what it is. I love the style that they are cast in. Base set is that's for any kid who grew up with the game. Like that is the nostalgic peak. But but TopSun was just, it was cheap. It was interesting. I felt like everybody was sleeping on it, and I just loved it. It was something where I was like, I want to own a set of this. I bought multiple complete sets in green, complete sets in blue. I'm very likely going to frame at least one of them.
That'd be cool.
I just loved it. Yeah.
So you talked about why you like it, but why did you like actively search, what was the first set? Is that kind of what got the ball rolling?
No, it was something on E4. I don't remember what it was. Somebody was referencing TopSun. Someone was referencing, it being the first set. And again, I had not looked out of first ed base, and now that prices have gotten so crazy, I want to find other sets that I can find joy in and dive into and start to explore. So I have started looking outside of that now. I'm still like, there's a ton of sets in the middling years, 2013 to 2016, that I just have zero clue about. I see the cards float around, but I just don't know enough to even think about sort of participating in those sets right now. But this was something, again, it was like, okay, I'm focusing on first ed base. Like, is this actually, the first ever set? And I read through all of Gary's old posts about all of these, people were arguing that it was no numbers, and then it was blue, and then it was green, and that was kind of like what the value chain was originally. But then Gary's posts were, well, actually, I bought up a huge number of kids binders, these Japanese kids binders, and
I can tell you, and again, this is the first time I've ever said this,
every single one of them in order was green and then blue. And so there's all of this like discrepancy over what was actually released first, what was printed first. But it seemed at least reasonably conclusive that it was the first ever set. And if I was going to own a piece of something, it felt like a good thing to own a piece of. So that the narrative is what drew me to it.
Yeah, there are a bunch of sticky sets out there you just gravitate towards and just get stuck on. I think, like you said, base set, the TopSun. When I first got back into it, you talked about how sports cards, there's just so many things. Like, I got out of it in 2002, maybe around Neo Discovery is the last cards I remember seeing as a kid. So when I got back in, it felt like there were way too many things. There's like 2 million Pokemon now, give or take a couple. It felt very overwhelming. So I do think the sets that have that sticking power, Gold Stars, I think that's one of them. I remember I reached out to you yesterday, the day before. I feel like that's one of the first 2 or 3 things you hear about when you get back into the hobby. That's why I like those. Did you hear about those when you first got back into it? Because I know you haven't bought any, right?
No, I haven't bought any. I did. So I bought 2 very big lots early on for roughly, I don't know, the $12,000 lot, and another one was maybe 15 or 20,000 from Australia. Started talking, but both those people were hugely helpful, awesome guys. Yeah. Guy from Australia I started talking to, and right away, he was mentioned that first ed base. He said, get hollows, they're going to be awesome, and basically gold stars. He said gold stars are extremely interesting. I still haven't looked at them at all. And I regret not looking into it more. But
well, they really haven't moved that much recently, which is what surprises me.
Yeah. So my own thoughts on that, and again, I take them for what they are that the people who are interested in gold stars are very serious collectors and people who have been like very well established in the hobby for a long time, and they do it because they're rare and they're well respected, and it's that thing. But I think newcomers, again, like you look at all the celebrities coming in now, whether it's Aoki and Logan Paul and Logic, all of these other people, right? Like, everybody just goes back to base. Like, it's just there, and I don't think you're gonna have new people coming into the space, at least for a long time. Like, it has to propagate out. Maybe you'll get millions of people coming in. They're all going to look at the very easy places to look. So Charizards, Pikachus, whatever that may be. Mm-hmm. And then some subset of them are going to start trickle out in others. And some of that's going to be because people are priced out. Okay, people are priced out of first set of base hollows now. Where do they go next, right? Is it unlimited hollows? Does that trickle down into other sets? Like, Some people are going to move because of price, and some people are just going to integrate into the community and move out of interest. And then it becomes the next most interesting thing. So then I think that's where like gold stars have potential, basically to have this large inflow of interest, but it's going to take time. So if you get 1 million people in, maybe 50,000 of them stick around long term, and maybe like a bunch of them probably bought and sold and they're just going to hold on to their collection. They have it. It's just a piece that they set aside. And then maybe 10,000 of that million are going to become interested investors who are actually going to dive in and continue to invest and explore those other things. And I think we've seen that huge influx of people in the popularity now, but it's just touching, those first touch points. So Charizard's, Pikachu's base set.
Yes.
We'll see where they go after that.
Earlier, you spoke about the funds that were created for the collectibles and all that. Has that had an effect yet? Are they being set up right now? Should we be looking forward to their effect? And how are they going to affect? How are they going to work? How can people get involved? Just what do you know about all that?
Sure. So I don't know which of these are private and public yet. So I won't name specific funds, but again, at least 3 $20 million funds with a couple potentially much, much larger than that. So they're being raised with a mandate of, they have to spend that money over a certain time period. And they basically, their goal is to maximize returns, right? But they're doing it with a 5-10 year outlook. They're not doing it they're not going to be buying and flipping cards. Like that would be more of a hedge fund, where this is like a sort of like more a venture investing style fund, right?
Right.
And so if you think about what they're going to be trying to do, they have to evaluate risk. They have to measure, downside risk and potential upside. They're going to go after premium items. Now, another place that you see this, like Rally Road. Do you know Rally Road?
I don't know.
Okay, so it's a recent startup, maybe in the last year or so. And what they do is they allow people to buy fractional shares of different assets. So they bought first edition PSA 10 set a while ago. I think that was in July for 120,000. So you could buy a share of that for like $25, right? So the whole group invests. You can own a bunch of shares, and then at some point in the future, they basically liquidate it and do it. So it's kind of like a fractionalized hedge fund fund for individual items. And if you look at the kind of items that come across there, and they're obviously trying to make sure they sell out, both have good investments and sell out every item. They really go for like ultra premium items. You don't see a random, I'll sort of talk poorly about some of my own cards here, but you don't see like a random first edition Blastoise going there, right? But they may do something like first edition Charizard or, Trophy Con, something like this, some of the stuff that's happening now that are really those high-end pieces. So I do think complete sets and ultra premiums, those are the kind of cards that are going to be the focus there. They're going to be getting, your LeBron James rookies, your Michael Jordan rookies. They're going to be a sports, the whole space, not just Pokemon. So I do think it's going to be the extremely high-end stuff. But again, once all of that disappears, or once all of that rises crazily in price, everything else follows. Like it's just the way that it is. But no, I don't think they've deployed significant amounts of their capital yet. So that effect is still to be seen.
Okay, so halfway through what you were talking about, I started to think, oh, maybe that's where the crash will come if they all have timetables, and then they're gonna, liquidate at a certain time. If enough line up at that, then there's going to be an influx into the market. But what you're saying is that they're going after very specific one card here, not buying up
So
a lot of cards.
The question is, like, if you were running a fund
Mhm.
and you had a fiduciary responsibility to your investors, and you basically said, what could you buy that you have to hold for 10 years and you're sure will make, let's say 20% plus a year? Not sure, but like that's the bet that you're taking. How do you deploy your capital? Let's say 5 million of that is allocated to Pokemon.
Yeah, well,
Like, are you buying Caterpies, or are you buying,
Yeah, well, I guess there's a couple ways to go for it if you want to be manipulative or not. Like you want to buy out.
assume that they're not going to corner markets or manipulate markets.
Yeah, you go after the trophy ones. You go after the big guys. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what most of them will do, right? But I think the simple answer is if you had that responsibility and you know, potentially could face legal ramifications if you bought up a bunch of commons and lost everybody 80% because you were being foolish, you know? Not that that's what will happen to commons, but like if you had to protect against that downside and really just buy the things that you're certain will do well, like I think that's where most of the money goes.
I'm just going to name a stat for you. I want you to tell me where that leads you and your thoughts.
Okay.
I was kind of surprised by this. I don't know. I think I thought there might be more, but I don't know. I looked it up. There are 620,000 millennial millionaires in America.
There's an interesting conversation there, but that's one thing that I do think is interesting is, while maybe only a small fraction of them will invest in Pokemon directly, I think there's a much larger fraction, and that's what excites me about, you know, these 20 to 30 startups being built around the space. Like, you may have, you know, banker bro A who would never own a bunch of Pokemon cards in his house, right? But he'll invest in StockX or in, you know, whatever, all of these new companies entering the space. You have all these people who are into like the streetwear via StockX and now seeing exposure to Pokemon through the platform. You have all of these new, again, startups and exciting tech stuff where people are going to deploy money into that space, and that's going to bring broader exposure. And I think the best thing that can happen, you know, and I say this from a investor perspective, the best financial thing that can happen is that people see it as a legitimate asset class, and people see it as something that is not just a craze right now, is not going to be, you know, the much overused term, another Beanie Babies or anything like that. People see it as something that is genuinely an interesting way to store value long term, that there is going to be persistent demand ongoing. Now that may make collecting much harder, but I think from a financial return, that would be the best thing, because money doesn't just come in just to people buying and owning the cards. They'll come into these funds, they'll come into these startups, which will enable more people, again, the rally roads, where none of those individuals can go and buy this first ed base set, but they can each buy $25 to get one share, or they can buy $1,000 and own a bunch of shares. And the same thing, like you were talking about, and you've been in this much longer than I am, about how overwhelming it is. Coming into this, most people aren't going to be like me, spending all hours of every single day, like diving into this thing. I know, some of us are, but most people aren't. And so the ability to make the space accessible to a newcomer, like even just price tracking now is a nightmare. Like, do I really need to go on 130 point and look at all of the last solds and try to compare across sets? Like, my portfolio, isn't there a nice place that I can just like track the value of my portfolio and see how I've done in this set against this set? Like, none of that stuff is built in here now. There's none of the tooling, there's none of the discovery. If you're coming into like a lot of, you know, I'll draw from other industries, a lot of, you know, daily fantasy, or just like, I don't want to say gambling, I don't want to associate this too much with gambling, but a lot of the tooling built around some of those industries are about empowering people, about making somebody who doesn't have the time to be a full-time professional, who doesn't have a time to spend all of their time on it, feel like they have the ability to still make informed decisions, or at the very least not be getting fleeced by people who have way more information than them. And so I think once that happens, it will make a very big difference for newcomers.
Yeah, so we're moving to a world, basically, if someone hears that Pokemon's hot, they know nothing about it, they can push a button on their phone and invest in Pokemon with someone that knows what they're doing.
I mean, part of it is that, but part of it is just like, if you come into the space and you want to do it yourself, you're a reasonably savvy person, like, how do you do it right now? If you have no knowledge of the Pokemon landscape and you want to know, where should I invest? What should I be looking at? Is this a fair value? Like, what was the value of this 6 months ago? None of that information is easy to find. Yeah. Just none of it. It's not like there's nothing for me to say, like, can I look at the Charizards across all sets? Like, what does a Charizards look like over time, right? What have been the popular ones? What have been, maybe I just want to look at art. What is the coolest looking ones and say, is that a defining factor? Coolest looking Charizards have the most value. They're like, I'm going to go through every single set. I'm going to look up if they had a Charizard. I'm going to, and maybe Bulbapedia has some of this, but I'm going to look up that. I'm going to look up last solds on it, like Pokemon price. A bunch of those things have had eBay, I guess, cut their access. None of the numbers are updated. There's just nothing that makes you as a newcomer feel like you can use some tools and basic, like that I think is the key. As a newcomer, you want to use tooling and feel about as informed as everybody else. If you look at people playing fantasy football, right? Like not many guys are going out and spending 30 hours in a week and digging into stats and doing everything. Most of them are using services or tools that say, here are some rough player projections. Use this as a base and now add your own little flavor on top of that, your own little insight or reason that you think you have some edge or alpha. And I think that's what this is missing, is there's just nothing. You have to dig through mountains of stuff to find anything.
Yeah, like I got in, I guess, January of this year or maybe December last year. And so it was a lot to learn, but then I just started using my intuition, and I started my question, I guess, is if we develop these tools and these services and stuff, will it kind of pick and choose the winners based on what algorithms, what variables they're using? Do you think the market could kind of turn into kind of an automated take all the...
Well, I think the market itself, in terms of the user base, will largely determine that. Like, if the algorithms are being manipulative, then people aren't going to make money on them. They're going to have bought bad sets, or they're going to see that they're underperforming, or whatever that is. In the same way that, like, if your fantasy projections are bad, people are going to use them and lose week after week, or see that they're just not very good, and people aren't going to use that service anymore. And so I think, like, the best service isn't the one that tells you what to do. The best one is that makes discovery or research for you much easier. And that is databases of available cards, that is pricing information being stored now and historically, and somehow intuitively being able to query that or access that. And that can be through graphs, it can be through actually search and filters. There's a lot of ways to do that. But it's just like, it's just not there yet. And the other thing I will say is that it's very easy in a bubble. Everybody looks like a genius. It just is. And again, going back to crypto, everybody who had any exposure to it at all, became a millionaire overnight. Everybody thought they were way smarter than everybody else. Everyone thought, being in early doesn't necessarily mean that you are, now you go into the space and there's plenty of inefficiency, there's plenty of opportunity, but funds have come in and other people have come in who are very, very sharp, who are doing detailed analysis, who have tons of resources being thrown in it, and the market got a lot more efficient and it's a lot harder. It's not like it was before. And I think part of it is like, and I ask myself this all the time. I've got in a couple months ago, great, made a couple $100,000. Okay, fantastic for me. Have I done anything special? I might have underperformed the market, right? I don't want to, I try to do things that I think are smart, but just because the market has risen and I happen to have exposure to that, unless I had like extremely specific reasons to, and a reason why I think I'll have an edge moving forward, I want to be extremely careful not to think that I have more knowledge or information or am, better than I am, basically, just as a constant reality check. And I think it's important for everybody to do in these kind of situations. Yeah.
Okay. Maybe I'm oversimplifying it. You want to look for, let me hear your thoughts. Let me think if you have any other ingredients that you want to add to the formula. Popular Pokemon, scarcity, the story, as to the release, is there any storyline to it? Think of anything else?
No, I mean, I think it's where will people go? Population for sure, which is scarcity, and then the individual popular Pokemon that will be outliers. So I think all of that is a factor. I think obviously price is a big factor. Like, just because everybody will look at first ed base 10 Charizard, it doesn't mean that there isn't something out there that's better to buy, right?
Yeah.
Again, it's all about kind of like relative value and where things will go. But at the same time, if interest wanes in the space, like, will people really be looking for stuff in the middle, right? Like, is it only going to be the fringes of like the most recent release that is extremely popular right now and the extremely vintage that will sort of keep people's interest? But that is definitely the formula. It's just yeah.
So I made a prediction on E4, maybe first week or two into March before the lockdowns and everything. I was still teaching on campus. I remember I had a little bit of free time. Probably shouldn't have been on E4, but I was. And I made a post because everybody was kind of running around with their hairs on fire, thinking, what if there's a lockdown? We'll be able to see this, how Pokemon handles a recession. Everybody was saying sell and everything. I made a post saying, wait a minute. Savings is wealth. People aren't going to be going out. They're going to be saving their money. They're going to be online all the time. I think Pokemon is going to be one of the best investments of 2020. And I got flamed left and right for that. And, some because they disagree with me, some because how dare you call this an investment? So I got it from both sides.
Sure.
And that happening doesn't mean I was right. There could have been other factors, but I feel like that's what kickstarted it. Everybody's at home. They're not spending money on anything. So my question is, if the world ever does get back to normal, who knows? We might not go back to normal. We might have found that things work easier remotely. So we might not go all the way back to normal. It's changed a little bit listening to you, all these funds and these new companies and these new ways to acquire a stake in Pokemon. So I think once all that hits, there's actually going to be another boom. But going back to what my question was, is if things get back to normal, is that when you see, could you see a big retrace, or are you not worried about that? Or do you think the cat's out of the bag? There's too many people now. There's all these great ideas about funds and whatnot. Do you think? Yeah.
I don't think we're going back. I think interest in most spaces, interest follows prices and opportunity, right? So that creates a narrative. Price creates a narrative for media. There's all these all-time highs. The market is booming. Sports cards are outperforming the S&P 500. Like, there's all these stories to be told.
Mm-hmm.
In the same thing, everybody reading that, everybody listening to all of the YouTubers and podcasts and all of these others sees opportunity. This is a opportunity to do things, right? Most of those people are doing that and entering the space are not doing it immediately with the mindset of, oh, let me start collecting, right? Most of them are doing it with the mindset of, there's opportunity here. How do I use that? How can I make my life better with this, sort of gold rush or opportunity that's happening? Now, a bunch of them may convert into collectors later on and they may love it. But that's sort of like what's coming in. And I think as long as that's happening right now, that's like, we're just going to keep seeing new entrants. Now, was that from lockdown? Like, I don't actually know if it's the reason that we're home, right? Like, is people being home what has done it for the economy? Like, we got these infinite dollar bailouts or not bailouts, but stimulus packages. Like, all of these things happened after the original S&P down that makes dollars worth a lot less in general. And if dollars are worth less, you put them in some way to hedge against inflation. Now, alternative assets, people investing in stocks, whatever that may be. So if we stop having this huge inflation happening, then maybe there becomes less interest. But I think for right now, it's like, that doesn't even matter. It's just, if prices continue to go up, there's going to be a story told about it and people are going to come in, and the test will be, all of the people who have got in, there will be a point where a bunch of these new entrants have lost a bunch of money, like in sports, right? Had I gotten into sports and not gotten into Pokemon, I would have bought a bunch of Luka. Like, again, I was looking for just that kind of like premium PSA 10, whatever. And maybe I would have bought a bunch of Luka Doncics and Zions and all this stuff. And since I started, like those are already down over 50%, right? So like how do new participants who came into that market and lost half of their money feel about it, right? Most of them are going to say, yeah, go ahead.
How did that happen? Why?
Why?
What's the pop on that card, or what are the factors that, it looks like a great investment, but then you fast forward a little
Well,
bit.
it's a newer card, so it's a newer card, so it's
Oh,
high
okay.
population.
Okay.
Part of it happened that the Mavs went out of the playoffs, so that story stopped being told. NBA season wrapped up, so people had less immediate interest in it.
Yeah.
So again, like your Jordan rookies, those things haven't done well, but those are extremely high price point. But new entrants coming in, like the question is just if they've lost a bunch of their money, how are they going to feel? And it's going to become, well, I just lost a ton of money. This sucks. I'm going to sell and get out. And that's not a story for media to tell. And so like, where does it go from there? So as long as prices are rising, new people are going to come in, the space is going to keep growing. And when you have some sort of retracement, it's like, what is that going to, if we have no more media attention, no new people coming in other than, personal references, where does that go, right? And I'm not sure what that looks like. Again, right now, there's so much that it's just fascinating. There are people in this space who started with very modest amounts, $10,000 over 3 years, and now they have a collection worth $500,000 or even more. And they're saying, it's not that they'll never sell. I'm not going to sell. I'm waiting for 2 million or, whatever that number is, some number bigger. And I saw myself and a million others fall into this trap before in the past. And the question is like, what does that look like for these people if that number goes from 500,000 down to 100,000 or 200,000 or whatever? Do they start to sell? Do they panic and say, I want some money, or do they just hold forever? Like, I don't know. Right now, if you've sold anything in the last 3 months, 6 months, you've done terribly. Like, they'll look at it and say, I've made a terrible decision. Maybe they have, maybe they haven't. But the question is, as things go down, and eventually prices will go down, that amount they go down to may be higher than it is now. Maybe we'll go up 5x from here and come down a little bit from there. But once that happens, where does it go from there? And I have no idea.
Is there anything that you want to talk about specifically? Do you think there's something important in your head right now that needs to be known? Oh, what you just talked about, I look at my cards every day. Well, I mean, I'll go a day without looking at my cards, and I'll think, wow, insert amount of money sitting in that room over there. I think that's life-changing money, And then I go and look at my cards, and I can't get rid of that one. I can't get rid of that one. That's why I think there's a little fail-safe there. Do you think that's going to be strong enough? Or do you think we're getting outweighed by people who don't really have a connection to these cards?
I think most of the money is still with the people who have that nostalgic connection. So I don't think that's going away. I think almost, a huge 90% plus of the supply is with people like that. And I think that's great. And I think that has great holding power. And, So you asked me if I have something important in my head. The one thing that I will say, and it's like, it's going against my best interest. Right? I don't want anybody to sell ever. I want prices to go up for a very long time. I'll sell some, things will be great. But having lived through this, and again, having more than I would have ever needed, the year after, like the next year and a half was one of the hardest times in my life. Had a lot of regret, and it was just, I kicked myself a lot of times. It was a question of why, you basically could have taken some off the table and your family, just completely sad. And the things that I noticed in myself, there's a point where the value, and even though it doesn't seem it now, right now you feel that nostalgic connection, and but part of that is you feel like that value is there. You feel like that card is worth that amount. And the question to you is, if that card was worth 1/20th of that amount, would you still feel it? And so the things for me, and that I saw in others around me that I felt like were the biggest indicators of us valuing the money more than the actual thing that we owned was a couple of things. One, you start thinking about the things that you can do with your money, but not as like this potential future dream, more as like an inevitability. Like, I'm going to do this thing when I get around to selling, but like it's definitely going to happen, right? So for me, like I was going to pay off all of my brothers and sisters' mortgages and my parents, right? So like that's just something that I was going to do. And that was an inevitability. Like I'll just sell later. It's fine. I'll cash out later. But like in my mind, I already felt good about doing that. So, other thing is thinking about, how much wealth you have, how much whatever this thing is worth, constantly. So constantly focusing on the number that's growing and not the collection. So if you're still thinking of, I've almost completed this set and not, oh man, this set is now worth $1 million, then that's still fine. But a lot of times we were wrapped up in, oh, this is worth this much. We weren't thinking about the thing anymore. We're thinking about the value continuously growing. And then the next thing was yeah, just if you find yourself telling people, and a lot of people are private about financials, so maybe that doesn't happen most. I came up in poker where we shared with each other how we were doing for the month, and that like boiled down to numbers. It's much more, I don't care to speak about the financial side of things, but basically if you find yourself telling people about how great you've done, like you're pretty much, you're feeling better about the success than you are about the thing that you own. So I will just say, for anybody who may be feeling those feelings, like truly ask yourself, if the prices went back down to 6 months or a year ago, what will your regret look like, and versus the upside. So again, for me, the difference I was considering at that point was like, the upside was what? You fly private instead of flying business. Like, it seems so trivial now in hindsight. Like, what was I thinking? Versus the downside being like, oh, you never have to work another day in your life. All your family is provided for, your brothers, sister, everything. You've done everything you've ever wanted. You have a completely free life to do anything, versus like, you're pretty well off, but like you don't have that, right? And the difference between that, the disparity is just unbelievable. So if you're the guy who put in 10,000 and have a collection worth $500,000, at least be honest with yourself. And the two kind of litmus tests that I use for myself is one, if it went back to 10,000, how would I feel? Do I feel like I've made a good decision? And two, if you had 500,000 in cash right now, no exposure to Pokemon, would you reallocate it the exact same way? And I don't think most people would. I think most people, if they had the 500,000 in cash, they'd maybe take 100,000 and pay off their house, put 100,000 in the stock market, and maybe put 300,000 back in Pokemon, right? But when you have it all in Pokemon right now, people, it just feels so bad. It's like ripping a Band-Aid off. They don't want to sell any. They don't want to do it.
Right.
Again, all of that advice is terrible for me, so I hope that none of you follow it. But I lived through it, and I really, it was something that was tough for me to grapple with on the downside. And
do you think that
sucks.
Do you think that pushes you? Is that an internal fire you got going on now because of that?
I think it's an internal, I'm going to make sure that doesn't happen again, basically. Okay. Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, like, yeah, I just, again, there's no words that can quantify the amount of regret or like depression that I had over that, and feeling just like, I don't know. I don't know why people, myself especially, like associate sometimes self-worth with, with how you're doing or your ability to provide for your family. But yeah, I felt like I had made this huge, egregious mistake, and I had let my family down, and all of these negative things. When it's just like, there was just so much greed. It didn't feel like that much greed at the top. And for me, it was like, okay, but if I have to, I'll sell, at 60% of what I have now, and that will still be amazing. Or I'll sell at 50% or 40%. And it was like, much, much less than that. And so there is in crazy bubbles, there is that kind of downside, and nobody ever wants to rationalize that. And everybody thinks there'll be liquidity there. But a lot of times, like, even if you say now you want to sell, like I'll definitely take some profit if hopefully we keep going up. But if we come down 40%, I'll definitely take some money off and make sure I lock it up. But at that point, there may be 100 sellers and it may be much harder to sell. And like it can just run away from you quickly. So yeah, it's definitely internalized in me in any way possible that I will make sure that I don't have that feeling again. But here I am. I'm risk on, well over $100,000 in this. Loving it. I've only sold, very, very few things. So maybe I'm doing all of the same things that I have before. But at the very least, I think about it now and I try to make plans. And again, for me, one thing so in selling my Raichu, one thing that I noticed personally, in the beginning, I wanted First Ed Base 10 and I just felt that nostalgic connection with it. I wanted it. It felt really terrible when I realized I couldn't complete that. And what I've realized after that is like the nature of just trying to complete a set is actually what I liked, what I enjoyed. I feel the same joy that I feel now with TopSun that I did with First Ed Base, whether I go on to, again, Southern Islands or promos or anything else. Like it's that feeling of something that's difficult and you're working towards and you're getting these pieces and you have them and own them. And like, I think I could find that same enjoyment in a completely other set if I had zero exposure to First Ed Base. I would be a little bit sad because again, that was what I grew up with. But in terms of collecting, like that's the part that I love is being a completionist, I guess.
I agree with that. The hunt, the actual act of it, it's very important. Yeah. Like, when I look at like, I still need an Alakazam. I did PSA 10 for the non-hollows and PSA 9 for the hollows because, I'm working off a teacher salary here. So like when I look at Alakazam now, one I still need, I've come to terms that, I have the Charizard, which thank God, do you know how much I got the Charizard for PSA 9?
How much?
$5,600, just a few months ago. So it could be worse, but now looking at some cards like the Alakazam and whatnot, like it kind of cements the idea in my head. I'm not gonna finish the goal, and I'm okay with that. I mean, it's kind of disappointing, but I'm okay with that, and it does open up the door to being able to part with some of them because I really appreciate you sharing your story about the loss that you could have avoided. Well, maybe could have avoided, but in hindsight, retroactively. So that being said, you still have a lot of money. We're going to wrap this up because I think we're over an hour now,
yep.
But there's a lot more to talk about. So hopefully we can do this again. That being said, you're cautious, but you still have a lot in Pokemon. I feel cautious too. I question it every day, but I still have a lot in Pokemon. I think we both feel that there's enough on the horizon that at least for the next couple of years, it's going to be a good bet. Do you echo that sentiment or?
Yeah. So if you asked me 3 weeks ago, I would say absolutely yes. I get more scared every day. Again, just First Ed Base commons terrify me how fast they're coming up. Like really terrify me. That to me is the one screaming thing. Like hollows, totally fine with the price movement. I think absolutely deserved. Bunch of other sets, actually totally fine with. First Ed Base commons feels insane to me. It feels like pure madness. So that is the one thing that to me has me going, really, how long can this go for? Like if we're talking 1 to 3 years, like is an Abra going to go for 5K? Like, is there a world where that can happen?
Like what I called Pikachu hitting 10K earlier this year, the Red Cheeks, like when it was around still $1,600 or something.
Yep.
Got flamed for that, and I felt like, it's justifiable to flame me for that. But when you look at the pop report, there's like 200. It's a historic card. It's they had to go back and change it because the Japanese, whatever, weren't happy, So it's great storytelling and everything. So, I felt like there were enough people. There were more than 200 people that could bid that thing up. And I feel Charmander, there's 3 times as much as that, but this is the Charmander card.
Yep.
This is the Charmander card. What are you going to put ahead of that one? So I feel like there are 600 people that this could be a $10,000 card too.
I I mean, it's almost there at this point, right? I completely agree with starters, with Pikachu. I mean, Yellow Cheeks is almost 10K at this point. They're selling for
I didn't buy
8,500.
I didn't buy a Yellow Cheeks at 250 just a few months ago because like, well, why would I want a Yellow Cheeks if I got the Red Cheeks? Why are people going to want Yellow Cheeks? Yeah, there are many things that I did like that, which it's you get your hits and misses for sure. But
yeah, I know you're trying to wrap up. Overall industry, very optimistic. Again, I'm no intention of exiting. I'm buying, you referenced earlier, like when we spoke not that long ago, my number was 120,000 and now it's like 160,000 because I keep on buying TopSun. I just bought a lot of TopSun hollows.
can we do it? I'm sorry, I keep interrupting you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can we do a PSA for everybody real quick? Not PSA, but a public service announcement. If you are interested in TopSun cards and you are looking to buy them raw, be warned, at least from my experience, a lot of them seems like someone just takes their fingernail and just draws into it, like when you hit it with the right light. Has that been your experience?
Yeah, so I wish I had it downstairs. I have about 300 to 400 raw TopSun cards that I got in from Japan, and I've been going in through them. And I feel like I've been pretty lucky. I set my bar pretty low. I mean, if you check, first of all, raw on eBay is insane right now. Like new raw cards that are listed this morning are like $50 per card, and they're not even in great condition, just for like your average card. So it's getting insane. Where I was buying like PSA 8 TopSuns not long ago for like $30 a card. But I would say of my 400, and again, not a lot of experience in grading. So I basically, I know what to look for. I'm trying to identify number of flaws, basically. It's kind of the piles I've sorted them into. I would say maybe 80 of the 400 have like 0 to 1 flaw. Maybe 120 have like 1 to 2 minor flaws. And so that would be like some nicking along the edges, maybe a little bit of light scratching. Probably about 100 of them are just like total junk, like hard crease across the middle or like insane scratching. And then there's a bunch in the middle that I think would be like PSA 6-ish. There's a bunch. TopSun had real bad centering. I wish I could show it now. I got a card that has the single worst centering I've ever seen in my entire life. And the point that like it's almost misshapen. It wasn't cut because it's like in the thing, but it like angles. It's really weird. I'll send you a picture of it at some point. But yeah, there's a bunch of others who have, I'd say like medium to strong flaws that it would be like maybe PSA 6-ish. So yeah, you're talking in terms of mint or near mint, maybe 40%. And I'm being quite particular when I'm buying raw in terms of like really zooming into every single image, everything that I can find. So it's just hard. They're really old cards.
Yeah, you need a lot of different angles because the glossiness, the reflective value, and all that. Yeah, you're gonna miss a lot of stuff. Yeah, I know I was trying to get you to wrap up. You were trying to wrap up, but I just threw another random question at you. But to sum it up, a lot of exciting things happening in Pokemon. We both feel pretty good about it. And for people watching, we are collectors, but I think it's important to talk about, the monetary value. I mean, especially when it's like life-changing for a lot of people. So please don't hate on us. I mean, it's a valid thing to talk about.
And you just have to understand the market you're in. It's a market. It was born by collectors. Collectors own the large majority of it right now, but there are a lot of new participants coming in who are investors, and they're going to play in terms of the buying interest and dynamics right now. Like they're going to start at least influencing your market some, and you need to at least be aware of what that might look like or what that might do to the market in general. Just you have to understand their mindset in some manner.
Yeah, for sure. Bryan, I appreciate your time today, man.
Thanks for having me. Honored considering the guests you've had in the past to be even considered at all. I know I am fairly new to the space, but I'm loving it, and hopefully you guys can learn something from some new blood perspective. So I really appreciate you having me here.
And we are having eBirdman on soon, so I know a lot of people look forward to that, especially people who like old cards. But I felt you had a really good perspective. You were making some noise. I saw a lot of your Instagram stuff. If you want to share your Instagram or your E4 handle before we wrap up or anything?
Yeah, Primordial AA on E4 and Primo_Pokey on Instagram. So feel free to reach out to me. Happy to talk to anybody, and make sure eBairdman knows that he crushed my dreams by relisting that TopSun set. I really wanted it, but no. Thanks again for having me.
All right. Thank you, man. Take care. Hopefully we'll do it again.
Bye.
See ya.
Sounds good.